Good afternoon. It is indeed a pleasure to welcome you to the Center for Online and Continuing Education Professional Development session today. And as we are moving close to the end of this semester, we are presenting to you some really amazing information about ways of setting up your quizzes in a way that is going to make sense to you, make sense to your students, and support the academic integrity that is such a vital part of who we are and what we are. And the topic for today is question banks, working with question banks and how to make them work. And I'll have to tell you, I am looking forward to this because it's an area that has been fuzzy for me. So I am delighted to introduce you to Mary Rotundo and Tim Reese, both on the COSI staff as instructional designers. So thank you. Take it away, Mary and Tim.
Thank you, Miss Judy, and thank you all for all of you who are here today. Welcome. It is our pleasure for Tim and myself to share tons of tips that we have actually learned from working with you and solving and pinpointing solutions based on needs that you guys have presented to us. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. So like I was saying, working in problem solving together with our faculty members, we learned a lot of features that Canvas has that will allow you to be strategic about selecting, organizing, and editing and growing your question banks. Um, so in a way that works for you, so we're actually letting Canvas do the heavy lifting when it comes to creating and using these question banks. So academic integrity is, of course, a big concern. And this is going to be one of the main reasons why we want to do that. But also from the faculty member point of view, creating and managing, storing our questions in a way that really makes our lives easier. And that's the rationale for what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to cover a lot of the what, a lot of the how, and also a lot of the basic steps for doing what we want to do. So we're going to start at the very beginning, which is identifying how Canvas deploys questions into your quizzes. And bottom line here will be the idea of where these questions live in Canvas and how they travel when we have them in the banks or when we have them in the quizzes. So this will allow us to do few things, and there are pros and cons to each approach, and we'll talk about those. And we're gonna be sharing more tips on organizing your question banks. So deploying questions from a question bank to Canvas can be basically done in two ways. The first way is here, finding questions. And when we use these feature, the questions actually are specific to your quiz. Basically, they live within the quiz and they travel with the quiz, but they stay there. The new question group is where actually the questions are being pulled from the question bank and they are general to Canvas. You can share them across courses um, and quizzes in different courses. So really where they live is really what determines what you can do with your questions once they're in a question bank in Canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what these two features allow you to do. So we're going to start with the finding questions option. And I'm going to go into, I created 3 quizzes where I'm going to show you how these different options work. But before that, I'm going to show you a very simple question bank that I created. So you don't need to have question banks that are gigantic. You can actually start building your question banks um, yourself, and that's exactly the point, allowing these to grow as you collect and edit more questions. So I have this very simple question bank here with 10 questions. And like I said before, I'm going to go into the first option, which is finding questions and moving them into the bank. So I'm going to go into a quiz, use my edit menu. I'm going to go into questions. So here's one of the things that I wanted to show you, that when you do it this way, you have to edit your questions one at a time. So that really complicates things a little bit, but I'm almost done. Thank God. Okay, one more. Okay, so again, I'm going to go from the quiz into the edit button, and then I'm going to go into questions, and I'm going to use the find questions option. So from here, I'm going to go and select the one question bank that I want to use. And I'm going to get, for this one, for this example, I'm going to get 5. And I'm going to scroll all the way down, and I'm going to add them directly into the quiz. So what this allows me to do is, let's say I have a case study or a long reading that I want to have at the top of my quiz, and then I want to have options, questions that are showing in a specific order. This function allows me to do that. So what I did here is I added 5 questions to my quiz. Each one is 1 point. And as you can see, there's no randomizing because actually I didn't want to randomize. I wanted to sequence in a specific order my questions. So I'm going to stop here and allow you to ask any questions. If you want to, let me know. I'm going to stop sharing for a second.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the question, when I prepare a question for a bank or for a quiz, am I using just Microsoft Word with graphics, with formulas, and I create that question and it stays there in that format?
Yes, yes. So when you create a question and you put your graph, you put your images, if you put it inside your quiz, everything will be there, your graph, everything. If you put it inside of a question bank, everything that you put in the question is saved. So it stays in the question bank.
So I guess you're going to discuss multiple choices and things like that later on?
Um, I'm not going to discuss creating specific types of questions inside of a question bank, but we can, if there's time at the end, we'll be happy to do that. And if not, you can get our contact information and one of us will work with you and we'll show you how to do that.
Thanks.
Mhm. Any other questions before we continue?
Yes, Mary, we had a question about accessing the question banks from all your courses.
Yes, and access to your banks you can do within the quiz. So you first create your quiz, and for example, I'm gonna go in here, and I'm gonna do the same process, edit, and then questions. Once you're here, and you go to the very bottom of your menu, and you click on either one of these two options, you'll have access to all your question banks. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. Let me just delete this group here. Okay, so we're here in a blank quiz with nothing on it. And I'm going to demonstrate the second option with using the find question feature. And to answer Dr. Ross' question here, you have access from that option to all the question banks that you have created in Canvas. If you don't want to do that and you want to only access the question banks in that particular course, then you go into the quizzes menu here, and right here you can go and see the 3 question banks that I have for this course, but you will see everything that you have for your specific course. So we were demonstrating what happens with the find question option.
Just a second, Dr. Augustine has a question.
Okay.
So I just remember I created lots of question banks way back with Blackboard, and it was possible to upload CVS files. It was possible to upload also files created with, I believe it was just a table in Word. I think that was possible also. And then this sort of randomizing of groups, is that possible with Canvas? So let's say you have a global, an issue, and you want to put in 3 questions and ask the system to randomly choose one, so that students who just get 1 of 3 or 1 of 4, is that possible in Canvas, and how does that work?
Yes, it is possible, and that's what I was going to demonstrate next. Yes, you can first you can upload questions to Canvas that are in different formats, multiple choice, matching, any sort of question. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to demonstrate how to upload, for example, from a QTI file from a publisher when you have a large test bank that you get from your publisher. But now I'm going to demonstrate randomizing within a quiz using the find questions option. So finding questions, again, the second modality will be creating a group. So I'm going to go into my quiz. I'm going to click on edit, and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to go into questions. I'm going to use, again, find questions. I'm going to look and select my question bank. And here I have my 10 questions. This time I want to select all of them because I'm going to be randomizing. And I'm going to go to the bottom where it says no group. I'm going to actually change that. And I'm going to create a group. I'm going to call it awesome group. And ideally, you want to have more questions in the bank that you're actually pulling to put in the quiz, because you for academic integrity. So in this case, I'm going to select 5, and I'm going to make each one 2 points. So I'm going to be at 10 points for now. So as you can see, this time my questions are inside of this box, which means they're within a group of questions. When I save, you will see that I'm at 10 points because each of my questions is 2 points. And when I do preview, every time I do that, which is what students will be getting, you'll see that my questions are showing up in a different order, and that I'm not always getting the same questions. Ideally, you will have a ratio of 1 to 3 or 1 to 4, which means that for each question that is showing up in the quiz, you have 3 in your bank. So the one of the advantages of using question banks that are your own is that with time, you can actually make that inventory of questions larger than what you start with. So my first question here says vegetarian. Second question says going back to school. And I'm going to go back to quizzes. And I'm going to preview again. And you'll see that I'm going to have a totally different set of questions. So this is how the randomizing function works in Canvas with find questions and creating a group. Okay, now the real power of using question banks is from the other option. So I'm gonna go into my quiz, a different quiz, and I'm gonna go to edit, same place. So far I was using, let me read this. So far I was using the find questions option. Now I'm going to go into the new question group and I will be able to do something that I couldn't do before. I'm going to go back to my quiz so that I can show you what I'm talking about. Okay, hopefully this time I will get the question I want. Okay, so let's look at this question number 5. So you see that I have a text that is in black. And the reason this is important is because I'm going to go into the question bank and I'm going to change that because there's a mistake. Let's say I identified that there was a mistake. So I'm going to go into the actual question bank. I'm going to look for the question that I need to edit and I'm going to make a change. And I'm going to make it really visible. I'm going to make it red. So now we know we're in the bank. I fixed the mistake in my question. I'm going to go back to the quiz where I pulled questions with the find questions option. And I'm going to see, let's hope that I get the question I want. I didn't, so I'm going to have to do it again. Here it is. So the change I made in the bank, it's not reflected in the quiz. And the reason for that is that when I use the find questions option, the questions live within the quiz. They're not general. They're pulled into like a copy of the actual question that lives within the quiz. If I want to have my edits reflect every time I make changes, every time I add a question to the question bank, then I will have to use the more powerful option, which will be the second one that I'm going to show you, using a new question bank. Sorry. Yeah, new question group. Okay, so I'm going to go in here. So so far I was using these option. Now I'm going to go into the new question group. And I'm going to call it group 1. I'm going to do 5 questions at 2 points for this one. Same thing I did before, but now I'm going to link it to a question bank. I'm going to link it to my bank. And I'm going to create my group. And as you see now, I have an indication. I know exactly where these questions are coming from. I'm going to save. So I'm at 10 points, exactly what I wanted. But when I preview, hopefully I'm going to get that question. Here it is. It is reflecting the change that I made. So I'm going to go back to my presentation. Okay, so here we have a summary of pros and cons using the different options. So to answer Dr. Agustin's question, either of these 2 options will allow you to randomize. Both of them will allow you to select specific questions. The new question group, which is the more powerful feature, will actually allow you to update your questions directly and move them, pull them directly from the question bank. But you will not be able to sequence if you do that. the way to sequence or organize your questions in a specific order will be by using the find question option without a group. So I know this is a lot of information, and that's why I wanted to demonstrate step by step. So before we continue, I want to ask again if you guys have any questions, anything you would like us to clarify before we continue with Tim.
Dr. Schindelbeck asked if I have many questions in my bank and I want to add more questions, is there a way to know if I'm repeating a question? Is there a way to see the entire bank in a Word document?
Yes, you can download your entire bank in a as a Word document, definitely.
You say I can, but I don't know how. See, I have banks that have hundreds of questions, but my students have copied all of them and they're taking tests in 15 minutes, so I know they have answers. So I'm trying to add more questions, but I don't want to duplicate what I have,
Of
and it's
course.
become quite cumbersome.
Yes, so I would say we'll get your contact information and we'll reach out to you later after the presentation, and we'll definitely help you with that.
Okay, thank you.
And if there's time at the end, we'll show how to download your question banks.
Hi, Mary. Nice to see you.
Hi, friends. How are you?
Good. How are you? So, you know, I create quizzes, but I also create midterm practicals for, you know, the online version of anatomy and physiology. So for the lab. So my question is, because what I've been doing as I'm creating the quizzes and the practical, I create my question groups as I am making the test. And for each question group, I add perhaps 5 or 6 versions of the same question.
Mhm.
But am I at the same time creating a question bank while doing that? Because it's not that I'm going and say, oh, I'm going to create a question bank. I'm putting in the questions. I'm just basically making up the quiz or making up the practical exam. And, you know, and I need obviously question groups because I want to make sure that the students get, you know, that particular type of question. So it cannot be like a generalized, you know, question bank with a bunch of questions. So I don't know if that's somewhere in my Canvas account or like, or how does that work? Or do I have to create like specifically a question bank on a separate?
Yes, you have to create a separate question bank.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay.
Otherwise, your questions belong to your quiz. And there's the only way you have to share them is by copying the quiz
Right.
and doing it inside of the quiz. But you cannot share these across courses. Let's say you teach 2 sections or multiple sections, you won't be able to do that.
Yeah, in fact, I have to like import the quiz or import the exam once it's done to the other sections.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So before we move on,
Thank you.
the creating, so first create your question bank. 5, you can create multiple question banks because you can name them different things so you get organized. Put them into your quiz using the second version that I told you. That way, anything that you update in the bank, you can always pull to your quiz. If you're going to import a quiz, next time you import the quiz, make sure you import the question banks as well. Because like I said, the question banks will not travel with the quiz itself. So if you import from one place to the other, you will have to relink the way I did it. I can do it again if you guys want to, or we can continue with Tim.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. And just to follow up on that question, I think I know what you're asking is, you know, if you've created a quiz, it sounds like you want to then just make those questions part of like, you know, a permanent question bank. There may in fact be sort of like a tricky way of doing that. So we'll do a little research on that and sort of come up with some options. I think it's a little tricky, but I think it can be done. So I wanted to go over a couple of tips for managing and organizing your question banks and some other things that you can do with question groups. So I want to talk specifically about uploading test banks from publishers. So you've probably all at one time or another uploaded a test bank that you know comes from your textbook, that accompanies your textbook. You might have asked your publisher for that. Remember that when you request a test bank from a publisher, they might ask you, you know, what kind of file that you want, what kind of format that you want. We generally refer to them as QTI, which is a file that can be actually read by multiple different platforms. Or you could just say that I want it in Canvas format, and essentially that's the same thing. But just remember that uploading test banks or question banks, you know, as we call them in Canvas, that it really has to be a QTI, a zipped QTI file, which is a compressed file. And it's pretty easy to do. You may have done this before, but just to kind of to review, you just go to your settings. So you're not really in quiz, you're just in your course settings, and do import course content. And then from this drop-down menu, you got a couple of options here. You want to select the last one, which is QTI zip file. And then it's just a simple matter of choosing a file, searching and choosing a file. This is what those zipped QTI files look like. It's got that little sort of zipper icon next to it. So when you, and by the way, they should be provided to you one file per chapter. That's typical. They might be broken out even further, but it's pretty typical to have them one file per chapter. And then I can just go ahead and import that. And by the way, those QTI files, you can't really read them directly. So somebody was asking about Word, you know, those files are like, they're just like coded files. So you can't easily convert or open those up in Word. You really have to import them into Canvas in order for it to translate and for you to see the questions. So I've uploaded, you know, I've got several test banks or question banks uploaded. So the next thing I'm going to show you, I want to talk about some tips. So Mary showed you, you know, basically how to create groups and how to, you know, do like the basics of setting up a quiz. So you might consider a few things. Like one thing that a lot of people do, and this was alluded to before, is that you might want to organize your question banks depending on what, you know, what it is you're trying to do. So I call it pre-vetting your question banks. So you do this so that when you do randomize quizzes or midterms or tests, that it's pulling only the questions that you want. In other words, only questions that are aligned to your particular objectives or that support your course. So say, for example, you don't cover part of a chapter. You don't want to pull questions from that part that you don't cover because, you know, students would complain if they were tested on something that's not in the course. So there's a couple things that you can do. One real simple way is to simply import the test bank twice. There is sort of a complex routine where you can copy questions from one group or one bank to another. It's a little tedious, but what I do is I import a duplicate test bank, and kind of looks like this. So I just imported this one twice. Let me move this out of the way. And then what I did is I just edited the name of it and just call it edit. So this is the one. This is my edited question bank. Now what I've done here is let's look at chapter 2. The original publisher question bank was 79 questions, but what I did is I went through and I sort of vetted this, and you know, this is you can edit the test bank or the question bank directly. So I just went through, and you know, you can see all of these questions here. And if you find something that you just don't cover, you can just delete it. Now, again, you've got a backup already because you've got the full test bank sort of as a backup, but this is my sort of pre-vetted, edited test bank. So you can just go through, you can remove the ones that you don't want, and then don't forget, well, actually, yeah, that's all we have to do. Okay. So a couple creative things that you can do with this. And the next part about it is about groups. So there's some creative ways that you can use groups, as well as pre-vetting and organizing your question banks. This is how you might create a midterm exam or a final exam. So the idea here is that, a lot of people want to make sure that they have equal coverage for each chapter. So they want to make sure that they're covering 20 questions per chapter, and they want them, maximum randomization for academic integrity. And say you've already gone through and pre-vetted those question banks, then you can basically create groups that pull from those pre-vetted question banks. And then that way you're ensuring that not only are you getting like completely randomized and an equal number per chapter, but that every question that's being served up to the student is something that you've covered and that you've already kind of pre-vetted. So, that's pretty easy to do. You follow the same procedure that Mary covered. So here's a midterm, and I'm going to edit. And to see my question groups, you go to questions. So these are the ones that I created. I've got, 5 chapters, pulling 20 from each. And all you do is just do the same thing that Mary showed you before. You can do new question group and say, I want to add chapter 6 to this group, to this midterm. And then again, we're going to link that to a question bank. I don't think I actually put chapter 6 in here. I'll just pick something else. You select the bank, and here it is. I'm telling it that I want 20 questions from that as well at 1 point each. Don't forget to hit create group, otherwise it won't save it. And then finally save the whole quiz or exam. Now, a couple other ways that you can organize your question banks. Some people don't want a lot of true-false questions, for example. Say you want a sort of a maximum of 5 true-false questions out of that 20. So you can create sort of like a separate mini bank of just true-false questions. You can sort of isolate those from your multiple choice. And then that way you could set up a separate group for true-false for each chapter so that you would have 15 multiple choice and maybe only 5 true-false. I know a lot of people don't want a lot of true-false, so you can actually divide them that way, and that will ensure that you've got control over how many are selected from that. So, so hopefully that gave you some ideas about how you can sort of customize your question banks and then use groups to sort of, have more control over that.
We have a few minutes, so I'm going to demonstrate real quick how to save your banks into a PDF. And just reiterate that we are here, and the reason why we know all these tips is because we have sat with you and worked with you, and we are always here and will continue sharing the expertise that we have gathered with working with you. Personally, I remember when I was in Davie, I was there for a couple years. I was the only ID, and I helped multiple faculty members from the College of Business who were there. They had these gigantic question banks from the publisher, and working with them and working through solutions with them, I was able to figure this thing out. So again, we are always here to help. So real quick, I'm gonna share my screen one more time. Okay, so if I click on this box, I will be able to see the right answer. So this is a really cool feature if you want to print out your question banks, but it only works up to 50 questions. So if you have more than 50, I would recommend splitting them somehow so you can not only check for repeated questions, but you can check for accuracy. And then we'll go right click on your mouse, and then you can do print, and this will allow you to print a PDF of your entire question bank. So that's how you can do it. And again, I'm gonna go back to our presentation. We have a list of resources to share with you. And they rank from the beginning, how to create a question bank, to more complex tricks like the ones we were showing.
Clearly, there is a definite need for getting this information and feeling comfortable with it, which is where I have been as I've worked with Mary to try to make sure that I know what I need to do to make it work for the faculty that I work with. So we truly appreciate what Mary and Tim have brought to us, and how to make this a relatively easy, not quite so fuzzy process for us, and something that is effective for our students as well, and also contributes to the academic integrity of our course. So we do appreciate you joining us today and being available to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for joining us today. What a great session. Thank you so much, Mary and Tim. Wonderful.